we are continuing our series on Hannah with an episode that I'm calling Leaving It in the Lord's Hands. Hey, it's Amber, wife, mother, type A child of God. Here are little things we look at everyday issues from a biblical perspective with one simple goal: to know and love God more. Thanks for listening. Now, if you joined me last time, you remember that Hannah was one of two wives married to Elkanah. The other wife, Peninnah, had children. Hannah did not. And Peninnah took it upon herself to make Hannah's life miserable. She just taunted her and provoked her and made her weep. And so that's what we saw last time. Now, today we're going to pick up from 1 Samuel chapter 1, beginning at verse 9 and reading to verse 18. Once, when they had finished eating and drinking at Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Eli answered, Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked him. She said, May your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went her way, and her face was no longer downcast. Okay, we're going to talk about a couple things here. First of all, Hannah made a Nazirite vow. So in the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 2 to 6, we read about this vow and what it entails. So this is what it is. God said, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man or a woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink and must not drink vinegar made from wine or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins. As long as they remain under the Nazirite vow, they must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. During the entire period of their Nazirite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. Throughout the period of their dedication to the Lord, the Nazirite must not go near a dead body. So this is the vow that Hannah made concerning her son. She said, Lord, if you give me a child, I will give him back to you, and no razor will ever be used on his head. And this is what she was telling the Lord she would do. She would set him aside, dedicate him as a Nazirite. Now, there are two other people in the Bible that we know that lived under these conditions. One was Samson, and the other was John the Baptist. Both of them were also born to women who were previously barren. But in both of their cases, an angel came in and announced their birth and gave instructions to their parents, telling them to raise them in this fashion. Hannah is different in that she said, Lord, give me a son. And if you give me this child, I will give him back to you, and I will dedicate him to you all the days of his life. So I want to talk a little bit about vows. So in Numbers chapter 30, we read that if a woman was married and she made a vow, then as long as her husband was okay with the vow, it would stand. But the husband had it in his power to either nullify the vow or stand by it. So if Elkanah heard this vow, he had it in his power to say, absolutely not, Hannah. I am not going to allow my son to be raised in such a fashion. You and I finally had a son. He's going to be raised like all of our other sons or all of our other children. So Elkanah had that power. God gave that power to the man as the head of the house to do so. Now we'll have to wait till next week to find out what Elkanah's response was to the vow that Hannah made. But in this instance, just so that you know, that's the Nazirite vow. And you know that Elkanah had it in his power to nullify it. Say, nope, we're not going to do that. And the Lord wouldn't hold it against Hannah. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 to 34, and then I'm just going to skip down to verse 37. This is what he had to say about vows. You have heard it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Now, God is not saying that it's evil. Jesus in this situation wasn't saying it's evil to make an oath if you're going to keep it. That's not what he's saying. Anything beyond this, the swearing, what he's saying is so many times we swear flippantly. We make silly promises, and that is from the evil one. So for instance, when my children were very little, this was something that I drilled into their head, because you know how it is when you have like a first grader or a grade schooler, and they are making promises all the time. Promise you'll be my best friend forever. Promise you'll come to my birthday party. Promise, promise, promise. And I had to say to my kids, look, we can't make promises like that, because we don't know if you'll even live in the same town as this person 10 years from now, or if you'll still be friends. We don't know if we'll be in a position to be able to go to their birthday party when it comes up in June or whatever. We don't know if we're going to be sick. We don't know if we're going to be on vacation. We don't know what our family situation is. And because there are so many things that are out of our control, the best we can do is, say, I would love to be at your birthday party if the Lord allows us to be in that position that we can come. But I can't make a promise. And we certainly shouldn't make promises flippantly. Now, Hannah was not making a flippant promise. She meant what she said with her whole heart. She truly was saying to the Lord, if you give me a son, I will give him back to you, and he will be yours all the days of his life. Okay, moving on. Eli the priest. Now, we could really take a shot at him right now and say, here's a woman who's down and out. She's at the end of her rope. She comes in to pray at the house of the Lord, and all you can do is insult her, put her down, accuse her of something that she wasn't doing. But we need to take a little step back here so we don't end up doing the exact same thing that Eli did, because we don't know the whole story. All we know is this is what happened. But let's put it in some context. We know that the book of 1 Samuel was written right after the period of the Judges. That was a time, because if we've read the book of Judges, we know everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. So there was a serious lack of good leadership. They would have a judge come along for a time, but they weren't good judges. They weren't people who were really walking with the Lord. Mostly they were deliverers who were delivering the people of Israel from the hands of the enemies around them who were enslaving the people. So they weren't necessarily good and godly leaders. They were just leaders who were, helping the people become free from the enemy nation. So they weren't great spiritual leaders. So we know that. We also know because if we were to read ahead, we know that Eli's own sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were incredibly wicked, and they were carrying out their wicked activities in the house of the Lord. So what were they doing? Well, here's what we're told in 1 Samuel 2, 12 to 17, and again at verse 22. We're told that among the things that they were doing, they were taking portions of the sacrificed animals that they weren't entitled to. So they were greedily saying, I want this, and I want this, and you have to give me this. They kept worshipers from bringing their sacrifices according to God's direction. And they threatened to use force on anyone who protested. So they said, no, you can't do it this way. You have to do it this way. And if someone was like, but hey, wait, we were always told, or this is what God says, they're like, force. We know that they seduced and slept with the women who worked at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And we know that all this led to the people having sort of a sour idea about worship and the priesthood in general. So Eli knew there was a great deal of wickedness going on at the house of the Lord. And in fact, one of the things that God holds against Eli is that he allowed this to go on. He did rebuke his sons, but they kept doing what they wanted to do. So with that in mind, maybe it wasn't all that unusual to see drunk people wandering in and out of the house of the Lord. We don't know. But what we want to make sure to do is not do what Eli did. And that's a really important lesson for us in general. So many times things look like one thing, but that's not the whole story. And it's really important that we don't jump to conclusions. Martin Luther, in his explanation of the Eighth Commandment, said that we should take our neighbors' words and actions in the kindest possible way. So even if it looks like this, instead of accusing someone that they have definitely done this, how much better to ask? To say, man, this sort of looks like this, but I don't want to accuse you of something that you're not doing. So let me just ask, is this really what's going on? Or is there more to the story? Or what's happening right now? That's really important. Now, Eli teaches us another important lesson, though, because while sometimes we may want to get to the bottom of the story, there are other times that we just maybe don't need to pry and we don't need to probe. So when Hannah responds to Eli by saying, look, I'm not drunk. I am desperately crying out to God. Eli responds with this beautiful blessing, saying, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you whatever you have asked of him. He didn't even know what Hannah was praying for. He didn't know what her situation was. And so he blessed her and said, may God grant it, without even knowing. That was a huge lesson to me way back a long time ago when I started studying this account, because I realized that there are so many people in my life that, you can tell at times that they're having a bad go. They either look a little disheveled or things don't seem like they're maybe going great. You can tell in how a husband and wife maybe walk into church, or how the kids are responding, that it's maybe been a tough week. And, we don't need to go know all the ins and outs of it. We can pray for those people and encourage them without even knowing. It is a simple thing. I specifically remember multiple times that older women came up to me after church and just gave me encouragement and said, how are you doing? And I would say something like, it is really a lot of work. And they would say, yes, it is. And, try to keep the important things in mind. I know that we get caught up in all the things and we want all the things, but just try to keep the important things in mind and don't worry about everything. You can't do everything. So it's okay. I even had one woman bring me an article from a paper one time and just really try to encourage me and support me and help me. And so those are important things to remember. We don't have to pry. We don't have to probe. We can give blessing and encouragement and pray for these people without knowing the particulars, because we know that God knows exactly what is going on. The way that this ends is that Hannah said to Eli, may I find favor in your eyes, which she had once Eli understood what was going on. And then we're told that her face was no longer downcast. She had taken her great pain and anguish. She had gone to the house of the Lord. She had prayed. And she gave it to God. God has huge shoulders. He can handle all the things that we can't. I like to say with the passage, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me. I like to say in that passage, the truth is the reason we want to be yoked to Jesus is because he does all the work and we get to walk with him. So it's not a matter of, God carries half the weight and we carry half the weight. When we are yoked together with God, he's doing all the heavy lifting and he can carry what we can't. So when we pour out our heart to God in faith, we can know that we have just put the situation in the best hands possible. We don't have to do any more. We can be like Hannah. It's done. I've handed it to God, and whatever happens from here on out, it's up to his discernment. He in his wisdom will determine how he will answer this prayer. And if he will give me what I ask, or if he will give me something better, or if he will say not yet, or if he will give me the strength, it doesn't matter. It's in his hands now. Beautiful way to live. And this is something that we need to help our friends, our Christian friends, to do. I have a friend who has really been struggling with something for a while now. It's gone on. It's much like Hannah, year after year. And she struggles so much with anxiety and worry about how this is going to end. And we need to be those friends who say, you have to give it totally to God and let him deal with it. We're going to pray about it, and then we're going to let him decide how he's going to answer this prayer. That's faith. We walk by faith, not by sight. In faith, we believe that God will answer this prayer even when we haven't seen it yet. And as I've said many times, sometimes our prayers, we don't see the answers to them for many, many years. Keep praying. Keep being bold, like we talked about last time, like that persistent widow. Keep going to God, being bold in prayer, handing the situation to him, and then whatever he decides, we know it will be good because he promises to work all things for the good of those who love him. We love him, then like a good father, he's going to respond in the best ways. All right, next week we're going to continue on, see how the episode, the account of Hannah concludes in 1 Samuel. Come back then. This has been Little Things, because in God's kingdom, the little things are the big things.